You'd have to be crazy. Crazy to spend 65 hours making a single suit, or use 300 layers of steel to create one knife, or to make whiskey by malting your own barley, crafting your own barrels, and employing a malt master who's been spending half a century honing his taste buds. Crazy. But once you've tasted crazy, nothing else even comes close. I'm on a mission to tell the stories of remarkable craftsmen and women. The Balvenie presents Raw Craft.
Bourdain, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
Last time you were here, we were talking about the Balvenie, and we were talking about this series that you do on YouTube. This is the second season. It premiered about a month ago, right? Talk about some of the people that you are handcrafting with, or you are interviewing that handcraft.
Well, we kind of moved a little bit. We tried to push it a little bit away from traditional crafts or things that, you know, you go to a craft convention or a craft fair, you're going to see certain fields represented fairly regularly. We thought, why not, let's do some cutting-edge pastry with Dominique Ancel, for instance, who's a tremendous, traditional craftsman, but also an innovator and an artist. This dude Takashi, that old-school Tabori tattoo artist,
right?
did a piece for me, the old stick and poke. And,
you got a stick and poke from him?
Yeah, my second. On camera.
Poke on my elbow.
Yeah, it's have you noticed, like, there's a sound component, and as these they sort of go in with these multiple blades right under the skin and sort of lift, and there's a sound much like the sound of when you hand cut steak tartare. It's the same kind of very familiar noise, which is a little disturbing when it's your own flesh, but
right, it really gives you a perspective on the flesh of the animal that you eat at times as well. That we're all made of flesh.
Yeah, but presumably the beef's dead.
So let's take a quick sip and talk a little bit more.
Yeah,
Why don't you?
good idea. Yes, it is. Most definitely, the sun is past the yard arm. It is time.
I think we can do this. So good, so smooth. Do you drink this on your own?
Yeah. Yes.
What is your? I mean, I'm assuming it's this because you're here for this, but your go-to sort of relaxed drink. What do you usually have? Is it a beer?
I'm a beer drinker. I mean, generally speaking, my beverage of choice is I'm drinking a pint of beer. Yeah. This is more of a special occasion thing.
Are you when it comes to the pint of beer that you drink, are you drinking sort of your standard beers like Budweiser or something like that, or do you go for the sort of craft brew?
Somewhere in the middle would be ideal. I mean, I get a tremendous amount of grief online, on social media every time on my show that I'm drinking sort of a commercially available beer in a green bottle. A reasonably respectable mass market beer. I always say, how could you be in Portland and not be drinking this craft raspberry Mumford & Sons IPA, because I like cold beer, I like beer that's at hand, and I frankly don't like beer.
It's hot, and you don't want a heavy beer. You want.
I don't want like fruity notes, or I don't want it to be I don't want to have to think about it. I certainly don't want anybody talking about it as they serve it to me. They're telling me this story of notes of hippie is not something I want in my beer.
When it comes to your liquor, do you like the story that comes along with it, though?
I don't need that, but I mean, I generally, I appreciate it. I mean, this is a good one, and I very much appreciate it. I mean, I've actually seen them make this stuff, and it's kind of, it's incredible.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'll be honest with you. When I go to a restaurant or to a bar, I just give me the basics, and I think the product, whether it's wine or beer or anything, it's going to speak for itself.
I love good wine, but I tune out after a certain amount of detail has been given to me.
Yeah.
Like, I just need the year, where it's from, and what I can kind of expect in terms of taste and sort of weight. And then if there's any more, I'm like,
oh yeah, I finished drinking it 5 minutes ago. You're still talking. It's like, it shouldn't take you 12 minutes to make my drink either. The eyedropper and the 12, 13 components. How do you go? You ever been in one of the craft cocktail bars?
Yeah.
You go in. You go in with a friend. I mean, the idea of going to a bar is to drink with your friends, not sit there staring at your drink, waiting another 10 minutes for your friend to get their drink. Or by the time your friend they construct this 12 component drink and squeeze the pomegranate in and jam in all the fresh herbs and the sausage or whatever. you're done.
you
It's
can't-
not so. It's antisocial.
If you can't make me my drink in a couple minutes, and you also like, I can't taste the actual liquor in my drink anymore. I don't want anything to do with that. I especially don't want too much sugar in my drinks ever.
I don't know. I go through. I really hate myself. I want to go to a tiki bar once a year. And I would just face plant it to a scorpion bowl. Come on.
That's that like dark alley chaser in you that like wants the worst that life can offer just to experience.
Tonight I need to drink out of a skull and wake up feeling really, really bad about myself tomorrow.
So when you set out to do the second season of this, you said you were sort of branching away from the original idea of what we consider craft makers.
Pushing it. I mean, I think. Look, pastry chefs and chefs, for that matter, come out of the same medieval guild system as metal workers, leather makers, people who work with glass. So I think that's not so much of a stretch, though. I think inappropriately people don't refer to cooking as a craft when it very much is and always has been. The tattooing, I think maybe that was new, but again, you're working within a very traditional style. You've learned through the old school apprentice system of repetition and working with a master until you reach a certain level. More often than not, you're working with classic designs rather than, but not always drawing yourself. Though in this case, he does freehand. So I thought it would be interesting.
Is that how you define craft, though, as sort of working in a classic arena, an apprenticeship style thing where you learn how to get better over the course of time?
It's certainly a common thread in the craftspeople we've been focusing on and in most crafts. It goes back a long time. There are certain traditions and methods that maybe only a minority of people still practicing or doing this thing adhere to religiously. We tend on this series to seek those people out who are doing things that old way, who are making the extra effort, taking the extra time, doing it less profitably, less efficiently than the modern age requires, really. That kind of sacrifice for quality is interesting to me. But I do like that old school, that when you can track the craft all the way back to medieval times and before often. Yes, of course, maybe it's because I cooked for so many years and really was to some extent part of that system. Yeah, that appeals to me.
Is cooking still your craft? Do you consider it a craft that you have?
I think I was a craftsman when I was a cook. I certainly was not an artist at any point. I was not an innovator. I wasn't a particularly great cook or chef. But I was part of a very old system. I came up through a very rigid, frankly oppressive hierarchy. Rightly or wrongly, I still have a lingering pride in how hard it was.
Well, most people who come up through any kind of oppressive hierarchy, at the end of the road, have an appreciation for what they went through and what someone does have to go through to sort of make it through that hierarchy.
I mean, I see somebody even doing something as simple as making a really good French fry or grilling a steak and letting it rest properly. I to this day, I respond to that. I think that's somebody who knows, somebody who took the time to not only learn how to do it, but are in practice doing it that way when they don't have to. It's little things.
Eggs are always my go-to with that. When I see someone knowing how to cook an egg really well or making an egg very well, a scrambled egg.
Everyone should. Yeah. Everyone should know how to make an omelet. You should be taught, every sentient human in America should be taught to make a decent omelet in school. And if you don't know how by the time you get out of high school, you should be shamed.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it should be a basic life skill like, wiping your ass, using money responsibly.
I think the same thing goes for if you're not a vegetarian and you eat meat, you should know how to roast a chicken. You should know how to let a steak sit properly. If you're going to eat meat, you should know how to eat it. You should know how to cook it and make it.
Yeah, you should know how to cook for yourself and a few others. And that's, if you're any sort of member of any kind of society, group, school, anything. I mean, you don't want to be the useless one if you're sharing a house with people or a dormitory. You know, no one should be the useless one. Everyone involved in this group should be able to roast a chicken if called upon to do so, and they should, frankly, be made to feel bad about themselves if they can't.
Well, also knowing how to do those things gives you a different respect for the meat, I think, as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's also, you know, we should make the most of the ingredients we're lucky enough to have.
Do you think that there is, I mean, specifically with profiling people who handcraft and innovate as handcrafters, as well as profiling these far-flung destinations that you go to on parts unknown, I think that you would probably you wouldn't want to say that there is an importance to it because you're a bit too humble for that. But do you feel like there's a slight importance to sort of profiling craft work, people dedicating their lives and their time to a specific craft, and as well as profiling far-flung destinations that some might not see?
I don't know.
I mean,
I
for
worked
instance,
in restaurants till I was 44 years old. To me, it is honestly it is a privilege to be able to do this. I'm lucky to be able to do it. It is a joy, most of the time, to be able to do it, because most people don't get to travel like I do. They don't get to bring to bear on any subject that interests them all of these terrible powers of, you know, video cameras and post-production and editing. So the ability to tell a story is creatively satisfying. To be able to focus exclusively on people and places that interest me. I mean, you know, most people in media, you know, the boss tells them, you know, you're doing a segment on, you know, the rutabaga shaped like Nixon today, or, you know, the heartwarming story of someone you don't care about at all. I don't live by those rules. I've been really fortunate to do what I want, and if, you know, in an almost evangelical way, talk about people doing things I care about, like good guys. So that's a privilege. So I don't know about important. I mean, ultimately, it's kind of a selfish act. It makes me feel good to do it, so I do it.
Do you think that unwillingness to compromise comes from having found success a little bit later in life, and you're sort of like, look, I don't have to do this I'm not going to do this if I don't want to do it. And
Right.
So don't put me in a position where I don't want to do it.
I think it's a function of having made a lot of mistakes in my life before I became successful with Kitchen Confidential. I think it's also the good fortune to have sort of blundered into television as the one guy in the room who didn't give a shit. And I realized very early on that this was a really powerful negotiating position to be in. So I never had to from the beginning, and I got used to that very quickly. And now I just won't have it any other way. It's not necessarily integrity, it's a quality of life issue. I don't want to wake up tomorrow and feel bad about what I did today. And I've been careful about, I mean, having had those mornings for, you know, much of my adult life, I've been careful about not finding myself in a position where, you know, I have to do something I feel bad about, or I compromise in such ways to feel bad. Again, it's not principle so much or integrity as it's a quality of life issue. I'd like to feel good tomorrow. I don't want to hate myself. I know what that's like, you know? Now,
we talk about the importance of both profiling people who handcraft and your show, which profiles destinations. And this weekend, you have the Puerto Rico episode coming up. In the episode, obviously, it was shot before Hurricane Maria, but in it, I think you talk. I haven't seen the episode, but from what I've read, you talk a fair amount about the debt that Puerto Rico is in. You know, that was the sort of the crisis that they were facing while you were there. Now it's a much different issue that's going on. Was there any talk about going back after Maria and juxtaposing the then and now? Or like
it was just logistically an impossible situation. By the time once Maria happened, I was already, you know, in Armenia and you know, rural Newfoundland, and you know, well into a very elaborately, painstakingly, and expensively constructed itinerary for new episodes. So couldn't. But I think what the Puerto Rico show, even though it was before Maria, highlights is how just the terrible, indefensible state of limbo, a powerlessness that this wonderful place found themselves in before. I mean, Puerto Rico, they're Americans. They serve in our military. They give so much to this country. We like them fine when we go play golf and go on vacation there. But we're not so sure about the rest. They can't vote in the presidential election. They essentially have no power to determine their own future. And because they're, for a number of factors, they find themselves now so badly in debt to basically predatory hedge funds and bankers who stepped in and bought, bonds, knowing full well what was going to happen. They find themselves administered by an unelected group of, I think, 4 or 5 people who were appointed by the banks, basically, to strip them of their assets as they choose, distribute those assets. So these are like 4 or 5 people appointed by foreign banks who can tell them, well, I'm sorry, you're going to have to take this amount of money away from the pension fund. You're going to have to close this number of schools. Sorry, you can't have a hospital. Sell that statue. I mean, they are entitled by law to recover their monies first before anything is spent there. So
treated like a company Gordon Gekko bought in Wall Street or something, just
or like a town,
yeah.
And that he's just pulling apart as he wishes. It is as if Gordon Gekko bought himself a country. Though, of course, this is part of America. And so we explore that and talk to people, what can be done. And I have to say, didn't really speak to a single person in Puerto Rico who saw their way out of this. And this is before. Now they're, 70% still out of power, without power, people drinking from, dirty water and streams.
I think we just found out this weekend that the actual death toll in the wake of Maria is like 911 people.
They're burning their dead. Yeah. This is America. And I think that's something, even though we shot before the hurricane, that we were asking how American does Puerto Rico want to be, and how American do we want it to be? We meaning mainland, full voting rights, American citizens, as they are American citizens. So, yeah, it's an emotional show.
So what has it been like for you after having edited that show, and Hurricane Maria happens, and the response from this country, this administration, to the devastation of Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico? What has that been like for you?
Like a lot of stuff, angering. Ashamed. I'm ashamed and I'm angry. But I'm also inspired by people like, Jose Andres, my good chef friend and colleague, who went right down there and started setting up mobile soup kitchens and started feeding people. And first he's feeding 10,000 people, then 50,000 people, then 100,000 people, then 1 million people. And he was there for weeks, tirelessly doing what needed to be done. I think he's an inspiration as a chef, as a human being, as a humanist, as a friend.
Then this is one of those instances where it probably feels like you get to add a little bit of depth to the national conversation that's happening.
I don't know. I mean,
you don't
depth.
like that position, do you? You don't.
Look, I get genuinely angry about stuff. We do talk about the hurricane in voiceover, and we add a little bit of footage at the beginning of the show to let people know. But yeah, I like it when I could do an angry show.
Well, so much of what you do, I mean, as much as you're having fun and traveling and a lot of times recreating, the tone and style of your favorite films or shows in these different parts of the world, you are also doing everything that you can to draw people's attention to the way a culture lives, the way a culture thrives, and the food of a culture. And anyone will tell you that the way people eat and how they eat and the traditions of eating in different cultures is really the backbone of those cultures.
Yeah, and to a great extent, an explanation of a history and a culture. Look, we do some more serious shows these days, but I'm always careful to throw in some episodes that are just straight up food porn or a brocastic brocation with Eric Repair, a complete knucklehead show. Bouncing around the French Alps, just having really silly fun. we really do like to change it up. Nobody wants to be hammered with, serious business every week. It's sort of, people get pounded into numbness. And that's not a reflection of who I am. I mean, I'm, sort of manically, I have happy days and then dark days. And, I think my work expresses that.
And I think with the in terms of sort of food porn or sort of beautifully shot craft, the Balvenie series that you have on YouTube really is the chance to have a lot of those porn shots, for lack of a better word. Tattoo, pastries, motorcycle craft. Those are the 3 episodes from this season that are up right now, and there's incredibly beautiful footage of people executing their craft.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fetishistic about, the details of the preparation of certain foods, and even things that you wouldn't think I would respond to, or I'm surprised by, watching somebody spend a month making, the world's best chef's knife. It's hot, Well,
we should, as people, we should be turned on and excited by people executing something to the best of anybody's ability of doing it and the process behind it. For decades, I blame the boomers personally. For decades, we've just been sort of this culture that gobbles up what's easiest around what's around us and what's easiest, and we have no interest in the particulars behind those things. And I think something like the series that you're doing, hopefully, pushes people to be a bit more engaged in the processes behind which they eat and tools that they use.
There's something really deeply beautiful and satisfying about holding or using a carefully made object. I never thought I would be, looking longingly at shoes or suits. That was just never me. But this show has, on numerous occasions, you want to run your hand down the collar and say, "Man, that's like really amazing work." Now that I know how it's done and how hard it is, I notice shoes now. Okay, that's like kind of like I'm a little freaked out about that. I never did before when it was last thing, but now I'll notice. Somebody's like, "Whoa, those are like handmade. Those are like some bespoke shoes, dude." Don't know which one. I can't identify them yet, but I've come to learn things I never thought I'd know anything about.
Do you feel like you have a newfound respect for crafts that are not aligned with where you sort of originally come from in regards to craft? Or did you sort of always have that respect, just not the exposure?
Had I known, I would have been respectful. But my experience, I think, was just so limited. I'd never been exposed to people who made shoes by hand, for instance. I mean, I always appreciate and respected people who spent the time and effort to make things really well. I mean, those are basic human qualities to be admired, and I was brought up to respect those qualities. I just didn't know people in those fields. I hadn't seen what it takes. I hadn't seen them do the work. So now, I mean, I know more. I'm aware of the details, what really goes in, and of course, that makes you more appreciative.
Have you brought any of these hobbies into your home, or any of these other crafts? Have you tried to sort of work on them yourself? I mean, Daniel Day-Lewis famously became a cobbler and a furniture maker after a performance, and now he's a dressmaker after his new movie.
Yeah, but he's Daniel Day-Lewis. He could do anything. I mean, he could do anything.
DDL.
I'm not that smart. I don't have that much time. It took me the better part of 20 years to become even reasonably good at French bistro cooking. I think it's just too late, maybe someday I'll make bad sausage. That would make me happy.
Cranking it out in the
I make
house.
bad sausage in my backyard, and subject my friends to it as science experiments when they come over. Try it. It's my new batch. It's like.
Before I open it up to our audience Q&A, I feel like I don't know if I've asked you this before, but if I have, I apologize, and I apologize for not having asked it if I haven't. Which is, what is your? Because we're talking about how long you set a steak down to rest, and I said eggs. What is your favorite thing to cook that is usually considered simple, but you still get a kick out of doing it right?
Pasta. Pasta. It's still magical.
You like making the pasta from hand and everything?
No.
Okay.
Most Italians don't eat fresh pasta often. It's either a seasonal thing or an occasional thing. a good commercially available dry pasta is, a thing of beauty. It's all about saucing it. I come to Italian food. I had some experience in Italian restaurants, but not long. It's not my area of expertise. But late in life, it just, for some reason, it makes me really happy. And there is this moment when you've made the sauce, you finish it as the pasta's finishing in the boiling water, and the sauce is reducing and finishing in the pan. When you drag the just short of completely cooked pasta directly from the water, dragging a little starchy water into the pan, and you start to toss it to completely dress, not too much sauce now, dress the pasta, and there's this moment where you jack it maybe with a little finishing squirt of olive oil, and there's this moment where the pasta sits up. It becomes engorged, one might say. Something physically happens where the pasta takes in the sauce, and the whole dish starts to behave differently. This is deeply satisfying to me. It makes me incredibly happy, and I cook pasta at every opportunity, and I'm way too proud of my modest pasta skills.
Is this a tomato sauce that you normally use?
Tomato would be one, but I mean, I love like spaghetti alla botarga, which is super simple. It's just basically mullet or tuna roe, cured, chili flakes, olive oil, super simple, or spaghetti with a sea urchin roe. It's, again, super simple, but there's just this moment where everything, all of the 3 or 4 simple ingredients come together just right. And it's, as you say, it's the simplest pastas that are the most difficult, like cacio e pepe, which is, again, 3 ingredients, super simple, tough. A real
Cacio e
carbonara.
pepe done right is like...
Carbonara, there's no cream in carbonara. It's easy to make with cream. Make it without, it's tricky.
I want to bring up the brand ambassador for the Balvenie, who's going to answer all of our questions in regards to it. Her name is Gemma Patterson. Let's get her up here right now. Give her a round of applause, everybody.
Let me get another shot of this, will you?
Yeah. So why don't you talk to us about the process of putting together a bottle of Balvenie, and I'm going to pour us a couple more shots while you talk.
Good idea.
That sounds good. So talk to you a bit about the process. Well, there is a lot that goes into making this whiskey. We not only is it matured for 12 years in the barrel, resting in our warehouse before it's ready for us to sip and enjoy, but it's decades worth of experience that's kind of culminating to make this. I mean, our longest serving craftsperson at the Balvenie distillery has been with us since 1958. We have a team of about 40 craftspeople. And if I add up their combined decades that they've spent making this whiskey, that's more than 1,000 years of experience combined.
So the sort of the person who's there with you, who's been the longest, has been there since 1958.
Yep, our coppersmith, Dennis McBain,
He's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder?
Tony met him at the distillery.
It's like, he works in this completely like steampunk environment. It's this really old, a coppersmith, okay, for copper distilling equipment, yes?
Yep, he tends and maintains the copper pot stills that we distill in.
Yeah, it looks like, one of those old like, Victorian era, well, it is Victorian era laboratories. It's an extraordinary thing to see. They got Coopers, I mean, people making barrels.
It's one of those amazing things where I think when we talk about occupations in this country, and the idea of the occupation is something that you're constantly moving ahead on some kind of ladder, but when you actually have a craft like this, what moving ahead is getting more and more comfortable to experiment and innovate and just sort of work in your craft a little bit. It's a different experience.
It takes a serious amount of dedication, spending decades of your life coming into the same workplace, doing the same thing, working with the same material, with copper,
but
or
knowing
wood,
those
like
minute differences between what you're learning.
And just slowly, day in, day out, it becomes almost instinctual. And from what Tony was talking about with the pasta and with chefs in the kitchen, it's the same thing. It becomes instinctual. When you look at our malt master, he spent 12 years as an apprentice, nosing casks, just smelling whiskey, day in, day out, 50 to 100 different samples every day. After 12 years, at the age of only 29, he was in the position to take over as master blender for our entire company. And there's 12 of these guys in the whole industry.
In the whole industry?
Yeah, there's 12 master blenders for Scotch whisky. So at the age of 29, he became one of 12. He's now served 55 years with us. But every single cask is unique. So just like while you're cooking in the kitchen, your groceries, your raw materials that you're cooking with, they're not necessarily going to be the same every day. So casks, everyone's unique. He's constantly having to change and shift and balance to ensure this consistency so that when we have our double wood 12, by the way, I need to have a sip of this.
Oh, yes. Let's cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Wait, so I am curious. He has been there for 55 years, right? He
Yes.
became the master at 29, right?
29.
29. So does he have an apprentice that's like ready, that's lined up and ready to fill his shoes in case, God forbid?
Yeah, very important. So
retires?
the whole apprenticeship structure at the distillery obviously incredibly important. These are skills that need to be passed on generation to generation. So it's very important that he has an apprentice to pick up these skills.
Okay, so
and
you
learn
guys are
from
covered.
him. Yeah, we're covered.
Okay, good.
We're covered.
The batches aren't going to
Same
change
with
or be too different.
no.
Okay.
And this was, we first launched this back in 1993, so we're celebrating 25 years of this whiskey next year. And it's the same as the day that we first made it because of his nose and his palate. So he's training up somebody to take over
How much
from him
whiskey
with
do
that.
you drink on a daily basis?
Me personally? It depends on the day.
Let's get some questions from the audience here. Who has a question? Right here.
All right. Hi there.
Hi.
Thank you for being here. Of all the books that you've written, which one do you find the most enjoyable and why?
Of all the books that I've written, enjoyable to write, I think probably Kitchen Confidential because I had no time to write. I had no time to think about what I was writing. I was still working 12 to 14 to 16 hours a day. I'd wake up in the morning before going into the kitchen, and I wrote in a state of complete freedom, free of any hope or expectation that I would ever sell a single book or that anyone would ever read it. And that was a very liberating experience for me, that not having to think about any expectations. Never thought for a second, what do people want? Because I was pretty sure no one would read the thing. Not having the time to stress over, trying to make each sentence perfect. I just woke up, jammed a cigarette in my face, and started writing. And then when it was time to go to work, I went to work.
At what point did you have a book deal when you started writing it? Was it?
Well, I wrote it under, I'd written an article that ended up in the New Yorker, and within days I had a phone call saying, we'll give you 50 grand to write a book. And 50 grand to me at that time was an unimaginable, spectacular boatload of money that was going to cure all my ills, and did.
Did it really? What do you mean?
Oh my God! I hadn't paid rent in months. American Express had been calling me and me not responding for 10 years, and I had not filed income tax returns for about the same period of time. So,
a true chef.
like a true junkie, I think is.
Next question.
Hi. So I was wondering, with a good Scotch or any alcohol, is it better to have it straight or in a cocktail? And do you think a cocktail maybe takes away from some of the flavor?
I think the most important thing to stress about this drink, and you speak to, my job is traveling around the country speaking to people about drinking this drink, and I've learned everyone has their own ritual, right? Their own way they like to enjoy it, be it with water, be it with ice, be it mixed up into a cocktail, stirred into an old-fashioned. There's so many different ways to enjoy this. What the most important thing is, it's finding your own way and how you enjoy it. And the reason why you're drinking it, just sipping it, enjoying it neat, might be what you're looking for. It might be 90 degrees outside and you're in Florida, which I learned when I first moved to the country, 90 degrees outside, and I'm like, I'm going to have my Balvenie with a cube. So, it's versatile.
Do people drink Scotch whiskey as an old fashioned? I've never had. I regularly drink old fashions, but I've never had it with Scotch.
You can. We work with some incredible bartenders across the country who make great cocktails with this. You're making a quality cocktail, use a quality spirit. Mm-hmm. Each one has its own kind of subtlety and variation and differences. You can do whatever you want with it. It's your drink. If you want to mix it into a cocktail, mix it into a cocktail.
I mean, I'd rather have Balvenie, like,
Yeah, if I'm drinking a 25-year-old single malt, I'd like it straight up. Maybe a rock. One rock. Arguably, and some will disagree, it opens it up in a way that I like.
you guys put some
Sometimes.
Coke in this for me? Maybe like a
Yeah.
single malt Scotch whiskey with Coke, please? No, okay. Right here.
Hi. Do you think it's like location matters when it comes to, like creating, the, alcoholic beverages, whether it's like whiskey or Scotch? Like, does it matter by location?
So
Great question to ask someone from Scotland. I'm thinking.
absolutely, we have 120 distilleries scattered across the country in Scotland. Not too bad for 5 million people. We're doing okay. We're making a fair amount of whiskey. But we kind of split up the country into whiskey-making regions. So Balvenie is in a region called Speyside, which is where almost 50% of our distilleries are, actually. If you go out west, then there's another region called Islay. It's an island on the west coast of Scotland where we have a handful of distilleries that make very heavily smoky, peaty whiskies. So there are some regional variations. But talking about, there is a question in whiskey about terroir and what that really means when it comes to making Scotch, because we've got, the west coast of Scotland is a lot wetter, believe it or not, than the east coast is a little bit drier. But nowadays, a lot of distilleries are actually using commercially sourced barley. They're using, they have centrally located warehousing in the central belt of Scotland, so they're not really even maturing their whiskey where it's made. Something that we have a real pride with Balvenie is that we're doing everything on site, from having our own, using our water source throughout the entire process, growing our own barley, malting it ourselves on site as well, and that whole maturation period. So the whiskey's resting. So if Tony's drinking a 25-year-old Balvenie, that spent 25 years maturing right by our distillery. And it's something that I can count on one hand, the number of distilleries out of those 120 distilleries in Scotland that are doing that nowadays.
There's a reason that, the wines of Burgundy are revered throughout history all over the world, and, the wines of Paterson, New Jersey are not so famous. Okay? I'm a big believer in terroir. And it works the other way. Like when I'm traveling across Italy, I will drink local wine, even if the local wine is not so wonderful. Because if I'm eating food from a particular region of Italy, I'm interested in drinking that regional wine, even if it's not particularly good. It seems to go together. It's an expression of something. I know where I am. I know that I'm someplace different than where I was maybe yesterday. So I think the short answer is, yeah, it really makes all the difference in the world, whether it's the animals you eat, the produce, the wines, or the spirits, cheeses, everything. It's the soil, the terroir, the air, the water, and the expertise of the people who grew up around those things.
Yeah, we've been making whiskey in Scotland since at least the 1400s. So it's,
And they don't call it Scotch, by the way, in Scotland. They call it whiskey, okay?
Next question. Oh, hi.
Hello. You have discussed that you fell in love with food when you tasted your first oyster in France. And I'm wondering, what was the moment like when you fell in love with perhaps whiskey or liquor? And why did you choose whiskey? Also, the same question goes for you. Why whiskey versus wine or anything like that?
Whiskey snuck up on me. Alcohol, a pleasant derangement of the senses is something that, all humans or most humans crave or like at some point. It was certainly, became clear to me very early on as a chef. It was not only an important part of my personal lifestyle choices, but an important part of eating. There is a little bit of a buzz. The matching of wine. There's something wonderful about bar culture to me, about even sitting alone at a bar and drinking a shot of decent whiskey. There's something about this environment that's good for the soul, in moderation. Whiskey came late. Appreciation of Scotch, of good whiskey, came to me kind of late. To me, it was a function of age. I started to think about it a little more, appreciate it a little bit more, become more aware. As I learn more about it, more aware of the nuances. There are certain times I drink whiskey and other times that I don't. when I'm feeling really good about the world or feeling really bad about the world is when I tend to reach for brown liquors in general.
So it's on the spectrum. It's rarely in the middle.
I'm in a philosophical mood when I'm drinking whiskey, and I'm often drinking it alone. Not in a tragic sitting in front of the TV watching The Simpsons in my underwear drinking from the bottle. I mean, I like to sit at a bar.
What an image.
A lot of, gallon jug of Wolf Schmitz and a box of, Captain Crunch.
Simpsons.
We've all been there, man. But no, there's something about, I've discussed the ideal whiskey drinking situation. It's 4:00 in the afternoon in a pub in Scotland or Ireland, for that matter, and you're alone at the bar, and there's just the right Tom Waits or Serge Gainsbourg or the Pogues are on the jukebox, and the light is just right, and there's dust motes floating in the few shafts of light coming through the dirty window pane. That's a good time to be drinking whiskey.
Well, everything that's been handcrafted, this goes back to what we were saying before, has a history to it. And what you just described as your perfect moment for drinking whiskey also embodies all of those historical aspects of it. You're talking about the Pogues, you're talking about Scotland. So, whiskey for you ends up becoming this thing that the perfect moment embodies a lot of the history of whiskey.
I think there are moments in your life when you are more likely to be receptive to the wonderfulness of food and beverages. There are moments, I'm sure we've all had them at some point, where you just notice, man, this wine is really good. It might even be magical. So when you find yourself in a place willing to receive that kind of information and experience it, look, best case scenario, you're not experiencing food, for instance, in an intellectual way, or you're not rating it, you're not analyzing it, you're experiencing it in a very emotional way. So when I can do that, when I can experience a really fine whiskey or a fine wine in an emotional way, I'm not thinking, notes of bubblegum, and no, I'm thinking, God, that's making my soul happy.
I'd say, smell and taste they're such powerful, evocative things. Like, how many times have you smelled something and it's instantly transported you back to a moment, to a time, to a place?
Yeah, cheap vodka, first year of college, all the time.
Well, I mean, when people are using this drink as an occasion to celebrate, say you've celebrated a wedding, a friend's birthday, and the next time you try that, it's almost like that celebration, that moment comes back. All through smell and taste.
When did you first fall in love with Scotch, with whiskey?
Well, I mean, kind of growing up, I grew up in the west coast of Scotland on an island called Lewis, which it's beautiful, but winters are dark and cold and wet and miserable. So, it's kind of a part of life there. Everyone is, enjoying a warm and dram at the end of the day, and it's a feature in your bar.
A warm and dram?
A warming dram.
Warming dram. So what, sorry.
A dram is a shot.
Okay, a dram is a shot.
But there's more to a dram than just a shot, So there's no real measure as to what a dram is. My definition of a dram is how generous your host is. So you poured my dram for me, I'd say, that's all right. It's a pretty good dram.
Hefty. That's a hefty dram.
We're starting on good footing.
Okay, good.
But yeah, it's a feature at home on the bar. My dad's bar, we always had a bottle of whiskey. I moved to Speyside 5 years ago. And when I'm traveling around the US and people ask me where I'm from, I say Speyside, and I get this blank look, just like when I mentioned dram to you.
You're getting the same look with Speyside as well.
Exactly right, because I think everyone thinks in whiskey terms like I do. Speyside, the whiskey making region where we have more than half the distilleries, so they were right on my doorstep. And I mean, name any other industry that's so generous with in educating people about their drink. I mean, all our distilleries in Scotland, they embrace people to come in and explore and discover. You visit us at the Balvenie distillery, and we will show you every single part of the whiskey making process and take you around on a tour there. So I just kind of fell in love with that, and I got into the industry. I didn't really know much about Scotch, but there's this real community in the whiskey industry, and it sucked me in. And I like to joke I lost my life to Scotch 4 years ago, and I'm still at it, still doing it.
The pubs in Speyside are amazing. I mean, as you can well imagine, when all the customers are whiskey experts and work in distilleries, good food and drink.
That sounds amazing. I think this is our last question, right?
Hey,
Right here.
what would you say was the toughest kitchen you've ever worked in?
Toughest kitchen. Look, it would probably be my first full-time job in New York at the Rainbow Room. It was a big, high volume restaurant at the top of Rockefeller Center. It was a union house. It was a very, very, very rough, very cruel, brutal kitchen. And, I was the new fish on the cell block. And it was hard, physically hard, emotionally hard. The food was not particularly good, but just keeping up with this crushing workload while being, mocked, frankly abused physically and mentally by my superiors and colleagues. In this, 12 different languages were spoken in the kitchen. None of them were mine. This was a steep learning curve for a young cook right out of cooking school. And it was hard, very hard.
Do you have a deep fondness, though, for that experience as well? Like, as much as you say mentally and physically abusive at times, do you also have a kind of, like, as we said, those who come from the oppressed make it through the oppressed hierarchy end up having a certain kind of respect?
Yeah, I don't know. I think my pride in enduring that led to me glamorizing it in a way that I'm uncomfortable with now. I mean, look, I don't know how else you could put it. I mean, I was molested in the kitchen, in openly, every day. Now, I had the option of stabbing the offender in the hand with a meat fork. Most people don't have, and everybody, I was a hero to everybody in the kitchen, and let's put it, my relationship with the guy who was causing me problems became much more civil after that, as you might imagine. But this is an option most people don't have in other workplaces or any workplace. So I think I was proud for getting through. I'm a little more ambivalent on how I might have portrayed that as whether it was a triumph or not. Looking back, I'm not so sure.
That went further than I expected it to. I have my issues in the kitchen as well, but they never went that far.
Yeah, well, there you are.
So, guys, for people to check out the new season of Raw Craft, the Balvenie Raw Craft with Anthony Bourdain, they can go to the YouTube page, right? I think it's, is it?
If you just type into your browser rawcraft.us,
Yes.
it'll take you straight there. There's 13 episodes up online at the moment from over 3 seasons.
And Anthony, Parts Unknown is on Sunday nights. Your Puerto
It
Rico
is
episode is Sunday
the
night,
Sunday
right?
Puerto Rico.
Barring any unforeseen news, it will be on Sunday.
I think there's a high likelihood of that, actually.
And Gemma, people can pick up Balvenie all over the world, right?
Yep, all over the world. Well, most countries, but certainly here in the US, most liquor stores you'll be able to find the Balvenie.
Anthony Bourdain and Gemma Patterson. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.